that learned about the meeting. So we'll give it another minute or so.
Juliet, am I allowed to say, is it hi to people that I recognize that I haven't seen in a long time? Like J.R. De La Rosa, good to see you, J.R.
Absolutely.
Hey, Jonathan. Great to see you.
It's been a minute, J.R.
It's been too long.
All right, we'll give it one more minute. This isn't, we don't need to have a quorum, but I do know there's a fair number of TAC members. So just to make sure at least the top council members get that extra minute to log in. Nikki, can you check the chat thing so that it just goes to the co-hosts and us, please? We have to do that to make sure we don't have serial conversations because it's a public meeting. So I'm sorry to cut off the text communication among you.
Done.
Thank you. All right, I see. Oh, and then for those who are council members, Taylor will be going in and putting TAC after your name just so we can quickly identify you. So we've got we've got about 6. Why don't we get started? I know we have a 2-hour block. We'll see if it takes the full 2 hours, but we wanted to give enough time to really dig into this today. So we can just get started. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for folks joining us who aren't on the council. Clearly a big day, and can't think of a better day to talk about resilience. So it's really exciting to be able to kick this or keep kicking this off because I know this has been going for a little bit. It's just a kickoff for me because this is my first chance to kind of really interact on this. So I'm super excited about it. It also feels especially important today as we virtually come together to give the land acknowledgement because today is such a powerful day in our history. We preserved the peaceful transfer of power, but we also have to recognize that the history of the Sacramento area and the people's rich in heritage and culture and tradition. This area was and is still the tribal land of the Nisenan people. They are located throughout the Central Valley, the foothills, Southern Maidu people, and the Valley Miwok and Miwok people. So there's a rich history that predates us. We thank them.
Sorry, Juliet, I accidentally muted you. That was totally my bad. I was trying to click something else.
I was like, oh, okay. What did you hear up to?
The Miwok.
Okay, the Miwok. So a rich history here. We thank them for their stewardship of the land from time immemorial up into the present. I'm actually based in Marin County, so I have the Coast Miwok people to thank. And so it feels really, really important, especially today, to make that acknowledgement. So happy to be able to do that. We are going to record the meeting. So I don't know if it's been turned on yet for recording.
We are recording.
Wonderful, thank you. So with that, we'll get started. We're gonna try to do the typical virtual meeting process where you'll be mainly muted throughout. We would love to have you on video especially if you're a council member, but understand that it's crazy days and that if you need to turn it off or if you need to deal with dogs, children, cats, chihuahuas, whatever, chinchillas, please feel free. We understand. We'll try to take a break, maybe about an hour in, if just to kind of stretch our legs. When we get to, it's going to be a very interactive meeting. We have a Miro board that we're going to be working off of to try to get as much of that in-person experience that we can. How we're going to do it is go through the chat, and then Taylor and Nikki will bring it over into the Miro board so that it's a little bit of controlled chaos. But if you have comments throughout, please raise your hand. We'll be monitoring the chat and monitoring the hands being raised, so we'll be able to call on people as they come. For those of you from the public, we're going to have a lot of opportunities for public comment throughout the process, both on the agenda item and also on the on just general public comment options. So let me just make sure. Taylor, in a minute, once people sort of settle into the room, will put her email in the chat box. And so if you're having problems for some reason that you need to go through email and need to contact someone via email, please feel free to contact Taylor. She'll be watching that. And I believe that's it. So with that, we will go to roll call. And I'll just go in alphabetical order. So Jacob Alvarez.
Here.
Charlie Brown. And wait here, let me put the gallery view on so I can see everybody. And I don't think she's here. I don't hear, okay. Christina Curry. No. Grant Davis. I think Susan, you're here in his place, yes? Susan is, you're the 707 number, correct?
Yes, Juliet.
Great.
I'm here for Grant Davis.
Wonderful, thank you.
I'll have to, thank you.
Yeah, I know you'll be hopping in and out, no worries.
Okay.
Thanks for joining. Laura Engeman.
Here.
Jana Gagnon.
Here.
Jason Greenspan. Don't see him yet. Okay. Amanda Hansen. Cressy, are you here as her alternate or as?
I'm here just as me, but if need be, I might be able to fill it.
Okay. There's no voting or anything, so I think it should be fine. David Loya? Nope. Okay. Dan McDonald, I know he's not coming. Just in case he did come. Okay, Sona, Mana. Darwin Musavi. Andrea House.
Here.
Jonathan Parfrey.
President. Oh, present.
Michelle Sarah. I think I saw her. No. No. Okay. Heather Rock.
I'm here.
Hi. Great. Lauren Sanchez. Mark Starr.
Here.
Brian Strong.
Here. Good morning.
Good morning. Gloria Welton. Don Wentworth. Okay, and Wilma Wooten. Okay, wonderful. So we can dig right into the meeting. In the words of our president, let's press forward with speed and urgency. So let's go to, I'm gonna go to the presentation. So we've done the welcome and the roll call. And so now, yeah, this is the main agenda item, will be discussion on the metrics. And the item number 3 will be where we can do general public comment, and then we'll wrap up. So a pretty focused meeting, and we'll just get going. So again, please, if you have any questions at any point, please feel free to raise your hand or put a question in the chat box, and we will be able to respond to it. So there's been a lot of work up to date, And so we wanted to, usually we've been giving kind of these reviews about it at a very quick 5-minute scale. We want to go a little deeper today just to outline the process a little bit more and how it ties into all of the kind of work that's happening at the state level. So for the metrics themselves, there's going to be 2 processes that are sort of working in parallel. There's of course our group, the TAC work group. That's us. That's what we're going to be doing today. In parallel, we've kind of rebooted or re-established the Interagency Resilience Work Group, which is comprised of all the state agencies, departments, commissions, boards, et cetera, who somehow touch the resilience and adaptation space in their work and their mandates. So while we're doing this work here with this council, we're also going to be starting to engage the IRWIG group to be asking the same questions, to be connecting to their end users, just so we can get this very broad sort of landscape view of all, where we need to move with the metrics. Ultimately, these will be tied into the state adaptation strategy, which is about to kick off imminently. And that by mandate, we have to update the adaptation strategy every 3 years. So we're up and we're starting that process. So through the council meetings, our quarterly meetings, you're going to be hearing a lot about the state adaptation strategy. There will be public engagement workshops starting in March. There'll be a survey leading up to that. There'll be lots of opportunities to engage on the state adaptation strategy. And it's going to be a little ahead of us. So as the state adaptation strategy starts to build its content, we're going to be digging into what we want to be doing with indicators and metrics, and they're all going to magically come together in the summer as we roll out all of this towards the end of the summer into the fall. There is also the work that's being done on the Ouija indicators, and I'm not going to be able to remember what Ouija stands for on the fly. So we can maybe put it in the chat because I don't mean to look past what it means. But those are indicators that look at what has happened and what is happening in the systems in response to climate. And so they are updating their indicators, and there's a lot of really good information in there that we can draw to think about how we're measuring things. And if there's an opportunity for some of the stuff that we need to measure as we go through our process, we'll hopefully be coordinating, or we will be coordinating with the OEHA team to see if there's an opportunity for cross-pollination there. And thank you, Jonathan, the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment. So this is the goal with this is to really link across all the efforts that are happening across the state. And there's a lot that's going to be happening in 21. Just to give you the pace at which we're going to try to move through this, these 2 working group meetings, we have one today and then one on February 26th, I believe, where we're really going to be digging into what we mean by resilience for social, natural, and built, and start to identify some initial indicators. We will be discussing that at the March TAC meeting with the full group. And this will be where you get the first suite of information on the adaptation strategy, which I should note is out of the resources agency, but OPR is working with them to help support that process. But of course, it's a statewide effort. In the spring, we will narrow down into the indicators and the metrics, and then those will be put out in the summertime for in stakeholder engagement to make sure, hopefully we've done a lot of engagement up until then, so we have a good sense of that what we're developing is appropriate, but that'll be one last chance to kind of get input from the communities out there on, are these the right metrics and will they help the communities on the ground? And then the goal is to have this all out by September. By the TAC meeting in September, we hope to have our first suite of metrics that we're going to test in the world and see if they help us get to the measurement of reducing risk and increasing resilience. There are a lot of foundational definitions that you all as the TAC team have already done. And so we don't necessarily, there's been a ton of work on this. And so we bring them here just to kind of lay the foundation. We don't necessarily want to open them back up because there was so much work done in these, but just to have a sense of this is what we're saying we mean when we say resilience. You could read it for yourself. I'll let you read it for yourself just so you can refamiliarize with how we've been thinking about resilience. What stands out to me in this definition is that resilience has a lot of definitions in the ecological space versus the engineering space versus the social space, and that this one has this kind of bounce forward component to it, which is to adapt and grow from a disruptive experience. It's not just to come back to where we were. The other work that you all have done is defining what vulnerability means, right? So this describes the degree to which natural built and human systems are at risk of exposure. And all that work, really important work on identifying what vulnerable communities means. And as New and Tara mentioned at the last TAC meeting, we're beginning work on the vulnerable communities platform, which is going to basically build the tool that will allow people to overlay all these components with climate to be able to really understand their vulnerability and how to move forward. Give another 30 seconds for you to read this through. Okay. In the previous discussions as well, the definition for indicators that was provided was pretty, this is when you read the literature, this is pretty typical of how people talk about indicators, right? They refer to a characteristic used to describe something. It can consist of a process or a condition. So we can be measuring outputs and outcomes. The metrics are how you would essentially measure whatever the indicators are that we identify. So this gets to this output versus outcome. In my mind, and we can discuss this to see what you all think, but the output are things like adaptation plans and those kind of concrete, tangible things that people do. The outcome is how successful those various plans are in moving a community forward to resilience. So this, I think, will be the challenge and opportunity with what we have to do with this project. Okay. And building off of the systems approach that ICARP has built, one way that you all have been talking about this and how we're going to explore the metrics is to really look at them in these three bins of human and social, natural, and built. So you can imagine that you would look at heat and be thinking about it from the human and social system, natural system, built, thinking about how do we reduce the risk, and then the adaptive capacity is really how are we increasing the resilience. I see that Jonathan is asking, where does exposure nest in the impacts and risk frame? And that we can talk about this, but it would, in my opinion, it would fall under the risk piece, because risk is a measure of your exposure, et cetera. So, but we can bring that up. Okay, so I see a lot of discussion already, and I'm just like tempted to do that, but let's save it for when we can actually talk. So actually, why don't I open it up? There's not, this is what this is for. So how about we open it up to some of the comments? And Jonathan, do you want to talk about your question about exposure?
Yeah, I think, as you well know, Juliet, and so many others who are scientists who are part of this process, that IPCC has traditionally framed vulnerability as exposure, sensitivity, and adaptive capacity. And it's kind of a familiar, well examined way of doing it. And so I'm just curious as to why the use of the word risk as is it a stand-in or an improvement upon exposure? Just wondering why that choice was made.
Yeah, and I actually don't have don't know, because I know that this was based on work that was done in previous meetings, and I don't remember the discussion about that from the recordings that I've seen. So I would actually open it back to the council members if you all remember if there was a discussion around risk versus exposure. I know, Mark, you had a comment too, so I don't know if you want to say your comment here.
Sure, yeah, mine's kind of on the same lines, a little bit of wordsmithing, but I'm thinking that we could just delete the words exposure to, and it would just read, are at risk of climate change impacts, because all of those systems are exposed to climate change impacts. And it's really the risk of the impacts that seems to be the key to me. Or it could be at risk from exposure to climate change impacts. But anyway, it's wordsmithing. But I think the risk, if we're going to have the word risk there, is really to the impacts themselves is the key. That increased vulnerability is a higher risk from impacts. We're all going to be impacted to some degree.
Thank you. Does it seem like it will influence the work to have it saying risk versus exposure?
Well, I'll just say I was just putting it in the chat just as something for future consideration. I don't know that we need it for looking at metrics. And I know this came out of prior work. So it was really just a kind of a sidebar comment for future consideration is what I really meant by it. I think a simple fix would be at risk from exposure to climate change impacts if we want to retain the exposure word because of international body. I don't know what their intentions were.
Okay. Are there any other?
This is Brian, and I remember we had some discussion about this use of risk in the past, and part of it is I think thinking about when the exposure happens, and to some extent everyone will be exposed once it happens, but I think there's also some concern about addressing risks kind of before the exposure happens. So in other words, that's I believe part of why we came up with this sort of type of approach, and we said risk of exposure. I agree though, we could, I don't see any big impact of changing it, but I think the idea, the concept was that we do have communities that may not be exposed now, but they are at risk of exposure. They may be exposed in the future. We should be addressing those issues, rather than waiting until it's already happened. So that's what I recall as part of the discussion on that item, if that's helpful.
Yeah, I think that's conveyed clearly because the vulnerability describes the degree, blah, 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 at risk, the degree to which systems are at risk. And so I think that makes sense, what you're saying. There's different levels of risk that equate to different levels of vulnerability.
Okay. How about this? Let me just make sure. Oh, there's a hand. Heather, do you want to?
Yeah, so, this is something that the other investor-owned utilities and a lot of other stakeholders debated almost ad nauseum with the at the California Public Utilities Commission on precisely this definition. And at the end, the commission adopted a definition that had been presented by the Department of Water Resources. And so the way that we defined climate vulnerability was that combination of exposure and sensitivity, because you can be exposed to something, but it might not matter. So perhaps we could add at risk of exposure and sensitive to climate change impacts. And then by doing that, we sort of acknowledge that exposure is one part of that equation. And then we can also align this definition with what other state entities are also using.
Great. Okay, thank you. Give me 1 second. I'm going to close my window because apparently there's a bunch of noise. So I'm going to Okay, sorry. Okay, well, this is really wonderful. Thank you very much. Sorry that I wasn't in the previous conversations, but what I'll do is I'll go back through the videos just to see if we can pull up exactly. Thank you for the collective memory on that. And then let's see what makes sense. We'll talk to New and Tara, see if she recalls how this all came to be. I mean, yes, exactly, Heather. Thank you for saying that piece, because that's how I've always thought of as risk, was the combination of exposure and sensitivity as well. So we've taken note of that. Let me do a little history digging, and then at the next meeting, we can come back and finalize that language. Okay. Any other thoughts or comments before we move on? Okay.
I'll just jump in and say, if you're going to look at that, the vulnerable communities definition almost just repurposes that first definition. So again, it says heightened risk and increased sensitivity, but I think what is meant is heightened exposure and increased sensitivity as a definition of risk.
Okay. Thanks. Okay, let's definitely revisit this. We'll chat and build the history back up a little bit, and then we'll propose some amendments to this if appropriate at the next meeting. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. So this is really the bulk of what we're going to be doing for today, is really taking when you do the work of defining metrics, you sort of want to start with understanding, like, what is the end goal and what is the outcome, the success? How do you know success? And so as we go through these systems, we just want to remind you of the definitions that are in the ICARP principles. So for resilient natural systems, we have natural systems adjust and maintain functioning ecosystems in the face of change. For built systems, infrastructure and built systems withstand changing conditions and shocks, including changes in climate, while continuing to provide essential services. And then the last is social systems. All people and communities respond to changing average conditions, shocks, and stresses in a manner that minimizes risk to public health, safety, and economic disruption, and maximizes equity and protection of the most vulnerable. So this is what we're going to dig into, all three of these. We're just saying them right now, just so you start having them in your mind. And just a reminder that we did put out a survey that was sent out to all of you. We've put it out on the listserv, and we've put it, I can't remember if we put it on LinkedIn, but we're starting to get some responses in, which is really exciting. And so while we're sending this out to all of you, and hopefully you're blasting it out to your networks, we're also going to be asking the same thing from the state agency perspective and departments, et cetera. So we're hoping, we will at the next meeting provide all the responses from this, and hope that this gives us a starting point for once we start to identify what the indicators are. I did note that there's a public comment about a definition from RAND, risk equals hazard times exposure times vulnerability. So yes, there are a lot of definitions out there of how to define risk. So thank you, Alexandra Huttinger, for your comment. We will definitely kind of dig back through the literature and find the right term there for that. The other thing that we wanted to acknowledge is that there's a ton of work that's been done, even with ICARP, the work that you've all done over the last 4 years. So from defining the vulnerable communities, you have a resiliency checklist that you've put out there that's part of the vulnerable communities, planning, investing in resilient California, which was infrastructure based. And of course, there are tons of amazing resources out there for how to think about measuring resilience. So we'll definitely be looking at these from a process point of view, from some of the indicators that they have, and we'll be bringing those to you in combination with the survey to just try to get as comprehensive as possible of a first view of what people have done, and finding the ones that are appropriate for us. So I think unless there are any questions, I propose that we just dig in and start the work of talking about each of the 3 systems. So I'll give 1 second if anyone has any, and just also part of what we'll be doing is identifying useful resources that you know of. So don't feel like you have to say that now. There'll be an opportunity when we're talking to start collecting those. I'll give 1 minute for, well, not even a minute, but 30 seconds if any council members have any comments or questions. Okay, seeing none, we're gonna dig in. Okay, so I'm gonna pop out from here, but oops, just so you know, basically the structure for the remainder of the meeting, we're gonna look at all 3 systems, built, social, and human, and we're gonna answer these 3 questions. Why do we wanna measure this type of resilience? How would we know if California has this type of resilience for each of these 3 systems? And who's already measuring built system resilience? And so that's that part of, if you know of amazing work that's been done, we want to capture that too. So this is what we're going to do on the Miro board. So I'm going to pop out of this and stop sharing for a minute and go over to the Miro board. And because Miro can be a little confusing if you've never used it before and chaotic, what we're gonna do is, all right, G, are you able to see the board?
Yes, we can see it.
Thank you. I can only see a few people at a time. So, okay, so just so you have the lay of the land, we're gonna work through resilience, built systems, natural systems, and social systems. We have our 3 questions lined. And so what we're proposing is we're just gonna basically spend about 10 minutes on each of these questions, starting first with built. And if you could please put your thoughts on each of these questions in the chat, then Nikki and Taylor are going to be bringing those into the Miro board. It just felt like that was the most efficient way to get this out there. And I'll be sort of watching to group if appropriate. So, and for everyone on the call, we'll work on these at the end of thinking about built resilience. Then we'll open it up for some public comments. So I'm sorry to have it sort of be this hierarchical approach. We were trying to mimic a live situation as best as we can, but it's just still kind of awkward. But so the first thing that we want to kind of focus on is the resilient built system. So we have the definition there that was based on the ICARP principles. And it's just this basic question of why do we want to measure resilience in built systems? So why don't we take a minute or 2, and if you have thoughts on this, please start putting them into the chat box and we'll carry them over to the sticky notes. We need like music. Great, starting to see some things come in. You know, sorry to do this. If you could send them actually to Nikki or Taylor or everyone, that'd be great. Jonathan, I can grab the ones that you sent to me. Let's open this up to for those who are the public non-council members. I think it's okay to also put your comments in the chat box. We'll be able to distinguish as appropriate if we need to for the meeting notes. If we were in person, we'd all be sitting around a table and we'd all be doing it together. So and Nikki and Taylor, when it starts slowing down on your end, let me know and we can start talking about these. Great. So we're seeing a lot of reasons. Looks like it's slowing down on Taylor's side. So if you have any thoughts and you want to send to Taylor, she can capture them here. But we've got a lot here. Let me open this up a little so we see more. Okay, so we have comments about water, human and animal health, save the chinchillas, food systems, medicine. There's a lot of reasons why we want to have resilience in our built systems. Is there anyone that wants to talk to some of the points that they put up here that they feel would benefit from some comments out loud?
Well, this is Jana. Since my sticky note is the largest one, I'll speak to it. First of all, it's great to join you all on this truly great day. And so just really quickly on this particular question, what we've done is really incorporate carbon life cycle analysis into our built system projects, so that even as we build to become more resilient, we are ensuring that we're not contributing more greenhouse gases to the core climate issue. And so this has been a long-standing tenet of California's resilience strategy. It's something we've talked about in this group many times, but I think it's difficult to do this with the built environment in many cases because we're not used to it. There's, you know, the metrics piece of it is really important. There are some good models, but we need to do more work to standardize it and institutionalize it. I'll leave it there. Thank you all.
Juliet, you're on mute.
Thank you. Of course I am. So thank you, Jenna. I think that's a really important point, that we're talking about resilience and really kind of coming at it from the lens of adaptation, but there's an obvious and clear link to the mitigation side of it. So thank you for capturing that. Heather, I see that your hand was up.
Yes. So one of the things we think a lot about in terms of how to prioritize investments, you know, particularly given that we know we have a lot of vulnerable infrastructure in our state and our energy systems and our, you know, transportation and agricultural systems. But, you know, in order to make sure that we're allocating resources in a way that's efficient and really tackles those big problems first, we need to be able to measure that, right? So if we want to, you know, ensure that, you know, for the amount that we're going to be spending to make our society more resilient and our built systems more resilient, in order to to know whether those benefits are going to outweigh the costs, we need to have a measure of what that resilience is and what that vulnerability is, so that we know that we're getting the biggest bang for our buck.
Great. Thank you. Yes, agreed. Laura, get your hand up, and then Brian.
Yeah, I mean, I think I see a lot of the same common themes, which is often we think about built systems as public infrastructure, and especially public critical infrastructure. So a lot of these are related to providing equitable and critical services to our, people and communities. So whether it's clean water, emergency, egress, and whether it's food systems or food availability, whether it's electricity. So it's kind of if we think about basic services and the intention of our public infrastructure, then when we think about why we want our built systems to be resilient, it's essentially for the continuity of those, providing those services. Which I think helps us get around also the fact that when we like to silo our built systems, such as a bridge or a road, and why we need to keep that or why do we need to make it more resilient, we get locked into thinking that that built system has to stay. But I think what we have to focus, similarly when we get into the natural systems, is what are the services and processes with which what are those designed to do, and is there another way to provide those? And as was just mentioned, oftentimes some of these critical infrastructure systems are maybe inherently built into like our older electricity generation framework, and if we're planning on phasing those out, are there new ways that we can move grids and transmission infrastructure, et cetera, to still provide those services, but maybe we don't necessarily need to keep some of our, substations right on the coast or in vulnerable areas. So.
Great. Let me just do a quick process check too. Are people able to read this, or do I need to zoom in a little bit so it's easier to see the comments?
I can read it.
Okay. Okay, and then Brian, you had your hand up.
Yeah, well, I would just sort of follow up on what Laura was saying, and what I'm seeing, which I'm really happy about, is this sort of connection to levels of service. And I think if we're able to identify, part of the way we're thinking about equity and equity metrics is through levels of service and understanding what services different populations have access to or are able to take advantage of. So whether it's proximity to parks or to clean air, or whether it's how long it takes, an ambulance or, to get to a neighborhood, those are all sort of related in some way to an infrastructure system. And I do think if we're able to understand levels of service and the connection there, then it can help us develop more equitable outcomes, which is ultimately what we want to do. So I do see that in a lot of these different comments. And I think if we wanted to sort of do meaningful metrics, it's going to be important to understand, that really basic level of what's the service outcome that we're trying to achieve. And there should probably be one during regular times, and then of course one during times of stress. So.
Great. Sorry, taking my own notes. Any other comments? I think that's it. So let's move to the next question. And so building on what you see here, building on the comments that were said, it gets to this. So how would we know if we've just achieved what we were talking about? How would we know if California has resilient built systems? So we'll give a blank slate and we'll give a couple of minutes let's use the same process. I think that seems to be working. So hopefully people are feeling like they're getting their comments heard. You can chat me if you aren't happy with the process. Okay. Nikki and Taylor, are they kind of slowing down there? If you feel more comfortable also speaking to it, please feel free. You can raise your hand and I'll call on you. Jonathan.
Yeah, I almost feel as if you take the previous categories and you flip them. So are people getting electricity? How long are they going without? Are people getting potable water? How long are they going without? Are healthcare being provided? How long are they going without? It almost strikes me that it's you're doing a gap analysis and then figuring out what the fulfillment of that gap might be.
Okay.
I will now mute myself.
Thank you. Not thank you that you muted yourself. Thank you for your comment. Andrea, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I think that in large part, the question should be answered by acknowledging that the best way of measuring that is by ensuring that they're built to, that the preamble, so prior to those systems existing, that there is adequate study, adequate resources, adequate, so evaluating and designing and constructing these systems for the purpose of resilience has been done. And I think in terms of local governments and special districts, oftentimes it's not adequate. The amount of resources dedicated to that isn't adequate. So that's my comment.
Great. Can I ask an annoying question, which is the analog to that? Then what do we do with the existing? Yeah.
Well, so in terms of capital improvements or public improvements, identifying those areas that are not adequate, and then obviously redirecting or allocating the appropriate amount of resources to bringing them up to a standard that will ultimately be considered resilient over the course of the life of those improvements.
Great, thank you. All right, I'm not seeing any other hands raised. It's a little hard to process all of this on the fly, especially with such, am I on mute? No, especially with such detailed comments. So this is wonderful, and this is exactly what we were hoping to get. We will try to absorb all of this and bring it back to you at the next meeting. So let's maybe move to the next one just to keep us moving through the systems, but I just want to make sure, are there any other comments that people want to say about a sticky that they put up here, just to draw attention to it or to clarify or anything along those lines here, trying to move so you can see all the different notes. Okay, I'm seeing no hands. Nikki and Taylor, do you have most of the comments in, or do you need another minute to bring them in?
All of the comments are in on my side.
Same.
Thank you. Thank you both so much for doing this. Okay, so here's where we can hopefully tap into some of the work that's already out there. This can be anything from, a neighboring city or your own county who's doing great work on this, or you're aware of something international or national. This is where we want to start to collect what you know already is out, what we can draw from. So we'll give this just a few minutes. And then I know that we've been having comments from the non-council members, but I do want to open it up for comments about the built system for the public after we do this. So let's give this a couple of minutes and then take some public comment and then move to the next system. All right, this one also we can be collecting over time, and this is also what the survey is asking for, so you'll have plenty of opportunities to share with us any of the existing stuff that you're aware of. I just want to open it up for any last comments on the built system. We'll start with council members first and then go to the non-council members. So council members. Okay, Jonathan.
Yeah, I'm actually a little surprised that I don't know of existing groups that are performing these measurements related to adaptation and resilience. I think it's kind of interesting. We all have a lot of ideas, but actually who's doing those measurements now? I think it's a pretty thin list. That's all. That's my comment.
Yeah, thank you. We have lots of pages bookmarked on our various browsers. I've seen a couple that are focused on built system. It generally tends to be energy focused. There's a lot on grid, resilience, etc. But there was a chapter in the National Climate Assessment that was focused on built systems. So we'll be looking at that too, but I don't believe that they had metrics in there.
I also think you have to consider that maybe people are doing it, but it's not being couched quite this way. So when you think about water resources planning, we have started to evolve in terms of kind of our regional water districts, thinking about look at their CIP plans, which include oftentimes reducing, you know, in Southern California, reducing dependency on freshwater systems and investing in potentially more, you know, stormwater runoff treatments and aquifer rebuilding. And so in essence, they are measuring built system resilience, and they are thinking about things that are going to be, you know, put to rest, and new built infrastructure that is going to be built, and the timeline and the lifespan for that infrastructure, and how that relates to the projected climate impacts for precipitation. So, you know, I'm thinking of including dams, water storage, all of these things. So, you know, I don't know that we've necessarily done it well, but I think people are trying, you know, we're trying to do that. And then, as I mentioned earlier up above, in some sense, the most obvious thing can also be in front of you, which is, as far as like transportation and some other built systems, if you look at the state's log for current existing maintenance needs, you are also finding a metric for resilience, meaning that as of today, without even projected future acceleration of climate impacts, those systems are already degraded and not capable of providing. So their resilience is already a D or an F. And then so I mean, we can grade our systems today and find out what would actually fall in the sort of, you know, grade A or B, and therefore then look at whether those will still be an A or B 30 to 50 years from now. And then there are systems that are already, like I said, getting failing grades. So clearly they are going to fail catastrophically in a short time frame.
I'm on mute. So I have noted looking at deferred maintenance, and then also looking for people who are measuring resilience without calling it resilience, basically.
And yeah, Juliet, can I just follow up on that? I think there's a lot, we've done a fair amount of the work. You know, there's a lot of work around earthquake resilience that have looked at this and establishing performance standards. And I think, you know, that's part of what we've been trying to do in San Francisco. And I think there's a lot of people that have been doing that. And certainly the, you know, the infrastructure grading that's happened and so forth. But if you do start to begin to develop performance standards, and we did some for all of our lifeline providers, I think that gets at this. But you're right, it isn't really defined in the same way as a resilience metric. But I do think there's a lot out there.
Okay, so is that captured here by SF performance standards, or is that captured here?
I'm not sure I see what, I can't see it on my screen.
I don't.
But
Okay.
Yeah, probably, I don't know. I'd have to click on that, I'm not sure.
I know it's hard.
Yeah, I don't think I put that in the chat. Someone else may have, at least not the link, but I can put the link to that report for sure in the there.
Okay, let's take any more comments, and then we'll move to the next system.
Actually, can I say something?
Of course.
Awesome. So I'm going to kind of echo what was said, but there are instances where I've seen in like progress reports, like one NYC, for example, in New York, they have a progress report, and it's pretty extensive, and it starts in it. You can start to see metrics kind of developing organically as they're reporting back on, this is how we're meeting our goals of infrastructure resiliency. They even have some other goals of like increased democracy and other things. And then they'll put the agency in charge, and then, you know, they're reporting back on things. But in that, I think you can start to see the formation of metrics that are starting to come about. It's just really interesting because I think there's other entities that are doing that too, in kind of a progress report type of exercise. So I just want to put that out there.
Yeah, thank you. I think One NYC, I don't know if that's also Adam Paris's work, but he had spoken to this group last year, so we can look again at their effort. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Is there another comment?
No, I was just going to say one NYC has been doing this for a little while. It came from Plan NYC, and I know people mentioned Houston as well. I think there's a lot of effort around creating resilience plans and programs. I don't know that anyone, there have also been a lot of efforts around creating equity metrics that have happened in 4 or 5 cities that would be interesting to look at, including Oakland and New York, St. Louis, some other places where they graded themselves. I don't know that anyone has really gotten to looking at equity in terms of outcomes or level of service or those types of meaning. I think that there's still a lot more work to be done in that area. So, but a lot of people are working on it. Resilient Cities Network is working on it as well. So it's another resource we could use.
Great.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, Brian, that there might be some interesting examples from both USDN as well as the 2 organizations that spun out of 100 Resilient Cities.
Yeah.
And I don't know from your participation in those groups if you've heard of any effort along these lines.
Well, Resilient Cities Network certainly has been talking about this a lot, and they have different groups that are looking at it. Again, a lot of it's been around place-based resilience too, and same with USDN, so resilient hubs and those types of that type of idea. So that would be another interesting concept to sort of think about is do you create what's more important, you know, the infrastructure that's serving the entire area, or do you just or do we go more place-based? And you know, when you create the sort of 15-minute, whatever, 15-block city or something where you can get everything you need within 15 blocks. So I can look into that though, Jonathan and Juliet, and try to link you up with some resources if they, for whatever they have.
And Juliet, related to this, have you interfaced with the AB 2800 infrastructure and resilience group and some of their findings, and could take some of those findings and feed it into some metrics analysis for our effort?
So that working group hasn't been stood up, but I was a part of that team, and I know what we put in the report. And we did, we said there was a need for metrics, but we didn't have any. And we, for the equity piece, we linked to the equity atlas. So that's the extent of the metrics discussion in the AB 2800 report. So.
I saw that Jameson just joined us on this call, and she's one of the authors of AB 2800. I thought maybe she could weigh in.
Maybe we'll give her a second to
get her footing first. I didn't mean to put her on the spot.
Okay, we could do this all day, actually, but we shouldn't. So how about we, do people feel like, I'm gonna put on the gallery view, do people feel like they need a little like 5-minute stretch break? I see one thumb up. Yeah, okay, let's take 5, let's come back at 11:10, so 4 minutes, and we'll move over to natural systems. Thank you. Let's dive back in. So we'll use the same process as before. Hopefully this is working for all of you as well. Here we're going to start focusing on natural systems. So, oops, I think we have an extra definition here. That wasn't supposed to be there. Natural systems adjust and maintain functioning ecosystems in the face of change. So same first question, why do we want to measure resilience in natural systems? And if you want to put your comments in the chat box, Nikki and Taylor can transfer them over. If you're just rejoining from the little break, we're going through the same process here of the 3 questions that we're going to look at. So now we're thinking about natural systems. Why do we want to measure resilience in natural systems? And again, I totally just forgot what I was going to say. Oh, yes, you can put it in the chat box and we'll transfer it over. Alrighty, does anyone want to make some comments about what they've put in there? We'll start with council members just to keep the process, but please, if there aren't any council member comments, we can open it up.
Hey, Juliet, this is Classy, and participating for Monda Hansen. I think one thing that we'd want to mention is just the vast amount of co-benefits that well-functioning, healthy ecosystems provide. And I dropped a couple into the chat, including carbon sequestration, water filtration, flood protection, recreation opportunities, water storage. I mean, the list goes on and on. So yeah, that's what I would add.
Great, thank you. This one over here, Classy. Yeah. Any other thoughts? It's a lot around these resources help human systems. You know, we have some of the resource agency folks on here. I may not be seeing it, but should there be a nature's sake component to this as well? I mean, I think Klesi, you were getting to that, but it's still sort of built into the co-benefits sort of for humans. So their thoughts on if that's appropriate. Yeah, there, Gina. Yes, intrinsic value.
And I would add, habitat, a huge, benefit of these resilient systems is also that they provide habitat for so many species, including, species that are endemic to California or species that are threatened and endangered.
Great, thank you. All right, Nikki and Taylor, is it slowing down a little bit?
Yep.
Okay, let's move forward. I think we're going to get more efficient with these questions as we go. Plus, we're touching on a lot of it because I think we know these are all connected. So how do we know if California has resilient systems, natural systems? And if you want, at the same time, if it's sparking a thought, please feel free to put in also systems that you know that are measuring, people that are out there measuring this. We can sort of tackle these two questions at the same time. Give another minute for people to pop in some comments and for Nikki and Taylor to bring them over. But if there's anyone that wants to speak to some of the points that they're making, we'll start with council members first. Okay. Seeing no comments or raised hands.
I would just add, sorry, I'm a little late. Very similar to the built systems. Again, we're talking, I think there's a comment on here about natural processes are still occurring, that we're not seeing disruption or loss of some of these ecosystem services.
Right. Yeah, the natural analog to continuity of service or level of service to itself and to us. Okay, and I'm just going to peek down here to see if anyone has had a chance to put in systems that they're aware of, people that are, or projects or things in place. I feel like this one is, there's a ton out there on measuring natural system resilience. So we can take a couple minutes on this and recognize that, that this is probably one of the most discussed, because resilience has been a term in ecology for, it comes from ecology, right? So
Brian, maybe you remember this too. I'm trying to remember the name of the report or maybe it was just a presentation that was given to this group when we were at the, there was a water district office about how natural systems can be used around the San Francisco Bay Area to combat sea level rise. And it seemed to me that there was some good metrics in that presentation that really compared sort of the natural versus the built approach. Do you happen to remember, and I'm sorry, I remember the presentation and I remember it being very powerful, but I can't put the specifics to it, but I could look back at my notes and find it.
Do you remember if
was that our meet? Was that in Sonoma? It may
Yeah.
have been in Sonoma. I do recall that.
That was it.
And I think it was some work that Sonoma County was doing, but most likely that, and I'm just forgetting the name of the woman that was there. I'm sure we can find it. There was also some work around from the Resilient by Design competition that happened in the Bay Area a few years ago, or it was kind of finishing around that time frame, where I think there was a lot of the different teams that helped develop sort of resilient measures to mostly around climate resilience and sea level rise had some measurements or developed some tools that could be used for measuring resilience.
Great.
So
I'll pop these in here. Resilience by
yeah, the Estuary Institute's another good place.
Great. Okay. So are there, oh, I didn't realize. Are there other, so in general, in terms of the natural system resilience, are there comments just about why we want to measure it, how we know it's successful, and some goals or some places that we should look to? Any other kind of closing thoughts on the natural system piece? And then we'll move to social.
So I found it. It was San Francisco Estuary Institute's Adaptation Atlas.
Great.
I'll put the link in the chat.
That's what I was referring to, right? With my comment about SFEI, I think that would be a really good place to look.
Great.
Agreed. The other good thing about that atlas is that it sort of spans areas. It doesn't sort of, it points out that jurisdictional boundaries aren't so meaningful. So
yeah, they had the term for it, right? They had a new term that they had coined for each.
OLU, Operational Landscape Unit, Nature's Jurisdictions, I think is their
yes.
That's exactly right.
OLU. All right.
All right. And again, when we we'll resend the link. If you think of other places that have done some work, that you can just put it in through the survey. It'll just prompt you, and it's an easy way. Or you can send it via email. I mean, we'll take it however. Smoke signals. Okay, so we are going to wrap up the natural system, and we're going to move over to save the best and potentially hardest for last, and definitely a case of last but not least. So resilient social systems. All people and communities respond to changing average conditions, shocks, and stresses in a manner that minimizes risks to public health, safety, and economic disruption, and maximizes equity and protection of the most vulnerable. So why? Why do we want to measure resilience in social systems? Okay. We have in case we have any doubt of the importance of functioning social systems, 2020 and now 2021, that's a lot of thought. So is there anyone that would like to expand on anything that they put or draw attention to it or make a comment? We'll start with council members first. Okay, seeing no comments from the council members. Any comments from the non-council members that want to add or clarify any of your points that you've made here? Jonathan.
Yeah, I think this is an incredibly important topic, and I just so appreciate this forum to explore this in this really focused manner with the governor's shop. What an amazing opportunity. I just want to thank you. I think we're very accustomed to the current frameworks associated with environmental justice. People who are often on the margins of American society, who are being exposed to toxicants, either from transportation or from industrial uses. And when it comes to things like extreme heat, you know, crazy hot heat waves, it exacerbates some of those air quality impacts that these communities are already experiencing. And so I think, you know, looking at those impacts are really crucial. And at the same time, there are some people in Southern California who don't even have air conditioning. And so when you have a huge heat wave like that, and if you don't have air conditioning, you live in Riverside, you're having a bad day. And I think it's really important that we explore who are the uniquely sensitive populations in the state that are really, these are frontline communities. In addition to the frontline communities that are exposed to toxicants, they're with climate change, that definition of frontline is even broader. And I think this process gives us that opportunity to try to identify those most vulnerable groups. I gotta say, here in LA, when it comes to extreme heat, I don't know how many different processes we've been through where we take CalEnviroscreen and we overlay it with a tree canopy analysis, and then we take Hyder Taha's amazing, you know, urban heat island work that Cali PA did, and we put that as another layer on top. And then we take Dr. Hall's work and we see where the predicted warming is going to be in Southern California. And we try to identify those communities that are truly, truly most at risk. And I think it's an incredibly important exercise for us to engage in order to save lives in the future. So I just want to maybe just editorialize on just how important this exercise is, and it may be the most crucial one of everything we've done. They all kind of fit together, but this one especially on really almost redefining who is frontline and where are the communities that we should really be focusing a lot of our resources in order to protect human life. So that's it. I'll get off my soapbox at this point.
Great, thank you. Again, thank you for the comment, not getting off your soapbox. Yeah, and that's great. And I think that's the work of the Vulnerable Communities platform is I think going to be focused on doing that kind of analysis so it's prepared so that we can see all these layers layered. And would also point to the Healthy Places Index as well, that is doing that work too. Okay, so any other, anybody want to speak up about any of the comments that they've put here, just to draw attention to, or sure.
Yeah, I'll just, what I also think is important as we sort of build upon what Jonathan said about, understanding the vulnerabilities of people in these frontline communities, and then connect this to, I can speak from my perspective from, working at a utility, as we think about our investments to improve the resilience of our critical infrastructure, I think when we think about how we want to prioritize those investments where they want to go, where we want them to go, we need to have that lens of the vulnerability of the communities and the prioritization of ensuring that our infrastructure can perform under stress with those vulnerable communities at the forefront, knowing that those are the communities least equipped to respond and most dependent on these services. And so I think, as we progress in this, and thinking about how do we weave equity into the equation of how we make our investments, whether it's for our natural systems or our built systems, I think that lens of equity and community and particularly those disadvantaged communities has to be at the forefront of how we prioritize. And understanding these metrics will help us to inform those decisions.
Great, thank you. Okay, let's move, unless I don't see any hands. So let's move to how would we know if we have resilient social systems? We're seeing a lot of great comments. I wonder so I think this is one of the challenges in this is thinking about events versus the chronic and the fact that it's not just sea level rise happens once and then it's done, it's that it keeps going and I think days will just get hotter. And so I definitely, there's a place for sure for the event-based stuff that happens. And so hopefully we can also think about how to think about the fact that climate change isn't going away after the event happens. And so is there some way to think about resilient social systems with respect to that? Okay. Looks like it's slowing down a little bit. Does anyone want to speak to any of the points that they made or some other things to consider beyond what's here? Seeing no hands raised and seeing that the comments are still coming in, give it another minute or so, and then we can go to the last question. All right, let's move to the last here. Who's already measuring social resilience? We've identified some of them, and there's folks on the phone call here from CDPH that are doing this, other agencies and other community-based organizations. So don't feel shy about mentioning your own work. I didn't know there was a gross national happiness index. I'm going to be Googling that this afternoon. Oh. It's in Bhutan. Great. So for this particular one, again, there's lots of chances for you to share it. And then just as a process piece, we'll compile all of this and provide it with the meeting notes. We'll follow up with an email after this with just reminding you what these questions are. So if you're thinking of something on a random Tuesday before our next meeting and you want to send it in an email, that's wonderful. And we'll absorb it all. The idea will be that we're going to bring this back to you in some form that has digested it, and now so that we can start to identify indicators around these. We'll spend some time at the next one just revisiting this, making sure we caught everything that we wanted to catch, and then start to think about the indicators. Just to open it up first to the council members, anything that people want to comment on, either how to measure resilience or the points made up above. We can open it there. Okay, seeing none. Kai, you have your hand raised.
Hey, yeah, this is a kind of a general comment about the social systems category. It seems to me that resilience in the social system also, the measure of resilience there depends on how well we can address resilience in the natural system and the built environment. So things like political stability or economic conditions, particularly for government agencies and things like that, or local government agencies to address climate change and climate impacts. They need to have social resilience to do that. So there's kind of that glue that combines all of these within the social systems category. I don't know where to fit that in the discussion, but I thought it's an important point to make, I think.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, just for the meeting notes, can you say who you're affiliated with your
Sure. I'm with Ascent Environmental.
Thank you. Yeah, and that's a very important point, right? These aren't, unfortunately, we can't just bin our systems into their own little system. They're all connected. And so that will be one of the tricks, is figuring out how to connect all of these. Was there, Alexandra, I know you had made a comment earlier on via the chat, and Devin, I think, as well. If you could just put your affiliations so that we can capture it in the meeting notes, that would be wonderful. Sorry, I forgot to ask before.
Thanks. Yeah, this is Alexandra Huttinger. I'm with the RAND Corporation.
Great, thanks. Alrighty. Any other comments on this? And it's been a pretty intense hour and 45 minutes, so I'm sure people are itching to check the news again.
This is Classy. One thing I just put in the chat, but I would also add, is watching what the federal government is going to be doing with the new administration. I did read something a few weeks ago that said that the new EPA admin might be potentially doing a revamp to EJ Screen, which is basically the federal government's version of Calendar Screen, but for the whole country. Has not been updated in quite some time, as you can probably imagine. But from what I've read, it sounds like there's going to be a big push and revamp of data and analysis at EPA around environmental justice and social systems. So I think that'll be something really great for us to watch.
That's great, thanks. Yes, there's a lot of hope and possibility before us. Okay, any other comments on, we can just open it up to all of these natural, built, social. We'll take council member comments first and then open to public comment. All right. We can wrap it up for the day. Again, we'll package this up and send it back out for review, and then we're gonna keep building on this. So thank you so much. I know it's hard to do this stuff virtually. It would be way more fun in person, but thank you for powering through. And at this point, I'm gonna stop sharing this, bring back the slide deck. And this would be the chance to open it up for any non-agenda focused public comment. 1 second. There we go. And I just lost all the visuals, so I can't see if was someone going to say something? Sorry.
Well, Julia, I just wanted to, I thought it was a great, sort of reiterating what Jonathan said, it was a great exercise. Are you going to put this together and then reshare it with us?
Yeah.
Is that the intent? Okay. So
yeah.
You'll put this in the comments together so we can reshare it, and then we'll shape it for going forward. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we'll not quite sure how we're going to do it. We'll probably give screenshots of the actual pages just so you have it that way, but we're also going to try to do some sort of binning or something, I don't know, to be determined. I think we would also like to incorporate some of what we're hearing from the survey. So I don't have it handy. Taylor and Nikki, I'm sorry, if you could put the link to the survey in the chat, that would be great. That's another way to collect some information on this. And then that's what we're going to dig into at the next meeting and try to start identifying some indicators and moving forward with that. I'm not seeing any comments or hands raised. So is there any general public comment? Jacob?
I know this stuff is hard being on Zoom, but I think you guys did a great job and kind of pulled all our thoughts together fairly simply. Just want to commend you guys on that. That's it.
Thanks. I'm glad we were able to have this meeting today. I was a little worried with it being on Inauguration Day, how things were looking, but it's great that it was a positive day and a good conversation. Okay, wrapping up, I do see a question from Jonathan about the Interagency Resilience Work Group. There's a bunch of agencies. It's basically all the ones that were part of the safeguarding process. It spans everything from the Delta Stewardship Council to, I don't know why I called them out, that just came to the top of mind, to us, to, I mean, CDPH, you know, basically anyone that has some touch in the adaptation and resilience space, they're part of that. Okay, so the wrapping up. Oh, sorry, was there a comment?
I'm so sorry. Related to that, in conversations I've had with the ICARP TAC board member, Amanda Hansen, she's indicated that there's going to be a new approach associated with the safeguarding report. And I was wondering if this is the appropriate form, or is there going to be another form where that is being discussed?
I would actually probably, I think it's, well, we're definitely going to talk about it a lot. I don't know that it's quite ready yet for general. We're still figuring out the process. So in February, there's going to start to be some more conversations about it. So I can see if at the February resilience metrics meeting, it makes sense to bring it up there. And then for sure, we're going to spend a lot of time at the TAC quarterly meeting in March, because there'll be a lot of connection. So I don't know, Clessy, I don't know if you wanted to say anything else, because it is being led out of the resources agency, and Clessy's a partner working on that.
Yeah, I think potentially best to have the conversation in March, as we're still getting all of our approvals from everyone at the top. But I will say that the approach is going to be a bit different on this version than it has been in the past. But we think in a really good way that really tries to break down some of the silo issues that we've hit in the past iterations of the safeguarding plan, and trying really intentionally to integrate various sectors, various departments' work, and also various levels of government better.
Stay tuned. Okay, great. All right, and our next meeting, I thought I had a slide with it, but our next meeting will be February 24th, and then the TAC meeting will be March 26th. And stay tuned for somehow a compilation of these notes that will make sense, we hope. So, thank you. Happy Inauguration Day. See you soon.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah, happy new President's Day.
Bye.